Hestia by C.J. Cherryh, copyright 1979, is a short science fiction novel set in her broad Alliance Union universe, although like many books in that universe, you can read it as a standalone. It follows a number of humans from Earth who are summoned to the distant planet of Hestia, where a human colony has been living in isolation for 100 years, trying to establish a thriving settlement. Around 50 years ago, they sent out a distress signal requesting support from some engineers to come and build a dam to prevent flooding, which is an issue on Hestia because it's a planet that goes through these elongated cycles of torrential rains, which combined with the melting of the snow on the mountains during the summer seasons results in the flooding of this enormous river basin where the human colony of 5,000 people have decided to live. And when these humans from Earth arrive, it's a 7-year trip from Earth, and the engineers, the crew of this ship, take one look at Hestia and they determine that it's not a viable location for human settlement and that it's a lost cause, so they vote to return back to Earth, essentially doing a 180 after a 7-year trip and coming straight back. But our main character here, Sam Merritt, is an engineer who is willing to try and tackle this challenge, but he is outvoted. So as they go to leave, all of the other human crew members make it onto the ship, but Sam Merritt is held captive by the governor of Hestia and given an ultimatum that only when he has developed and constructed this dam can he then leave and go back to Earth. And so all of his other fellow crewmates leave the planet and he is stuck there and given no choice really but to go up the river and construct this dam in order to prevent this cyclical flooding that is wiping out all of these agricultural communities and threatening the capital city where he landed in Hestia, which is called New Hope. So Sam heads out on this sort of antique tugboat with a father and son crew who escort him up the river away from the city of New Hope towards the highlands where there is another community of people that he's going to live with. Sam and the human crew initially queried why these people don't choose to live in the highlands, why they don't move into the mountain regions which are heavily forested to get out of this flood zone in the river basin. And the people of Hestia say that they can't do that because there is something living in the forest which is proving to be a great threat for them. And this is something that Sam is initially skeptical about. But as he's traveling up the river, Cherryh is introducing you to this world by describing its yellow-tinged clay soil, these sprawling blue-green forests, and this environment which is almost entirely bathed in this constant misty rain, which is very evocative. I think Cherryh does a really good job at building this world early on and building the characters as well. Given the fact that this is only 160 pages, she is quite efficient in doing that. You feel transported pretty quickly with this feeling that is sort of like a frontier western, and that's something I'll talk a little bit more about later on. But Sam and the crew of the boat arrive at the site where the dam is to be constructed, where there is a small community of people that he becomes established with. They are quite happy to see him, they are eager to get started, and they are providing the manpower to help with the construction of the dam. Pretty quickly, it is clear that the people that the humans have said are living in the forests are real, because there are these frequent raids on this township where supplies will go missing, cattle will be killed, and even at times people will be caught up in violent conflicts between these native beings. And for quite some time you don't really see who they are or what they look like. I mean, the cover art there, which is a really nice painting from Don Mates, shows what they look like, so I'm not necessarily spoiling it. But they are these kind of furry, cat-like humans. And I realise I've talked a few times now about these science fiction books which have these scantily clad cat ladies on the front, so that's becoming a bit of an unintentional theme. But the book mostly revolves around Sam attempting to construct this dam and running into difficulties with both the humans on Hestia and these native beings. And this sort of triangle of conflict that happens throughout the book is really what drives the plot forward. I mentioned that the book feels like a frontier western, and I think that actually this is a very thinly veiled allegory for the American frontier, and specifically the interactions, the communications, and the conflict between those settlers and the indigenous people of North America. And actually, I felt a little bit disappointed that Cherryh didn't do more with this. It's sort of just this framing mechanism for the plot, for the story, for these characters, and she doesn't really dive into anything too profound or too deep thematically, which doesn't detract from the book all that much. It just means that it's not achieving that next level of greatness that I think some of her other books do. So if you do want a fairly quick read with some great world building, some great characters, and this frontier western in space kind of vibe to it, then Hestia, I think, is a pretty good choice. My memory card ran out of space midway through recording that, so hopefully the framing is not completely messed up. The next book that I read is Mission of Gravity by Clement, copyright 1954. I've got this Pyramid Books edition with a cover painting which is credited to EMSH, and I don't exactly know who that is. Interestingly, there's a quote from H.H. Holmes on the cover there. Not that H.H. Holmes. The dates do not align there, but it certainly made me question it. And this is a hard science fiction novel, which is actually featured on Science Fiction, the 100 Best Novels list by David Pringle that I'm reading through. It's one of the earlier entries in that list. And it is set on this enormous disc-shaped world where humanity have had this research probe crash. And because this environment is so hostile to humans, because the seas are liquid methane and there is frozen ammonia snow and a variable gravity between the center and the outer edge of this disk world, which is referred to as the rim, where the gravity actually becomes up to 700 times stronger than on Earth. So these humans can't actually get to this research vessel in order to retrieve it. So what they do is they recruit the help of some of the native alien beings, which are called the Mesclanites. This planet is called Mesclin. And these Mesclanites are these 15-inch long caterpillar-like beings with these pincers and multiple eyes, who are in communication with the humans in orbit via this small radio device. And they have been able to learn English and communicate with these humans, who are essentially directing them on this vast journey across this strange world so that they can retrieve this extremely important research data and research equipment that is on the crashed vessel. The Mesclanites are essentially merchant traders who do travel around the planet anyway, trading materials and resources with other Mesclanites. And really, the book is mostly told from the perspective of one of these alien beings, who is called Barlenon, who is the captain of this seafaring vessel that is the driving force of this expedition. And most of the time when science fiction books are told from the perspective of an alien, or they include aliens in general, oftentimes, particularly in books written around this time, the aliens are just humans but they've got blue skin, or they're humans but they're furry, or they're humans but they've got feathers. And really what I think Clement does extremely well here is tell a story from a completely alien perspective in a way where he considers the extent of their knowledge and the world that they have evolved in to great effect. So for example, because gravity is so strong here, the Mesclanites don't have the concept of flying at all. And so they really struggle to wrap their head around how humans are flying and how they've traveled from other worlds. And they don't even have the concept of throwing. And so when the humans present these projectile weapons, they are totally baffled by this. And I thought that this perspective was extremely well done, and there are loads of examples in here of this sort of thing, and it is done well. And actually, I think you do come to really like the character of Barlenon and his crew, And I think that the interactions between humanity and the Mesclanites is enjoyable to read. The two are slightly skeptical of each other, they're slightly suspicious of each other, but ultimately they do have a mutual interest in retrieving this research vessel, since there is this sort of exchange of knowledge that's taking place. Unfortunately though, I do have this issue that pops up for me time and time again with these hard science fiction novels, which is that because this book is this journey where these characters keep encountering problems time and time again, it is so focused on the physics-based or engineering solutions to these problems, which are described in great detail over numerous pages. And because this book is, again, only about 170 pages long, so much of the page count is concerned with these scientific problems, which are written in a way that I found to be extremely dull, at times very boring. Towards the end of the book, I had to fight this feeling that my eyes were glazing over. And so I think it will depend on your preference and whether you do like this kind of scientific detail. I know that is kind of funny that the part that I like least about science fiction books is the actual science, but I'm not sure personally that I want to read 3 or 4 pages, which is a good percentage of this book, of how a pulley system is developed to lower some components down a cliff. I was much more interested in the alien perspective around some of these concepts and the interactions between the aliens and the humans than I was in the actual detailed descriptions of these solutions. So all in all, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me, this one. Like I say, I do like elements of it, but overall I was kind of bored. These two are both books about missions on alien planets, both very different, both taking very different approaches, but similar in length. I think that the CJ Cherryh is much more entertaining and enjoyable. I think that Mission of Gravity offers something for hard science fiction fans and people who want to read about a genuinely alien perspective and a genuinely alien world, which is much more imaginative than Hestia, I think, which is quite basic in terms of what it's doing thematically. So there you go, they're the 2 books that I've read recently. Have you read either of them? Have you read any CJ Cherryh or How Clement? If you haven't, let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.